Welcome to the Biz Gone Social podcast. We help entrepreneurs navigate how to get known, get customers, and get the edge over their competition. Here is your host, Lorraine Duncan.
So here we are on the Biz Gone Social podcast, and I am so glad to be here. And my promise to you, as always, is I want to give you a little bit of verbal caffeine that's going to energize your business. Because after all, don't you want to be the business that everyone's talking about? I know I do. And I'm so stoked today to have Roy Osing with me. Welcome, Roy.
Hey, thank you very much. Pleased to be here.
So tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm the guy that was fortunate enough to be in a leadership position to take an early startup internet company and grow it actually to $1 billion in annual sales. And actually, it kind of gives me goosebumps when I think about it because it was such an amazing accomplishment by so many people. And the way that we did it turns out to be quite unique. It didn't happen overnight. But the word breakaway kind of describes, and audaciousness kind of describes the leadership style that I had to basically, take this business and get unimaginable growth in retrospect. I mean, we didn't start out thinking that we were going to get $1 billion. We knew that the upside was tremendous. And we just did some things that others didn't do and differentiated ourselves. And just kept plugging away and look back. I mean, that business today is $18 billion a year. So I like to think that, that my team had a little bit of a role to play in that growth, just getting it going. And so, so it's growing businesses, as you say, getting known, getting customers, and getting more than an edge. I mean, my view was we need to dominate the competition out there if, in fact, we're going to make a big difference. I mean, this was in a telco world, right, which was a monopoly, heavy traditional culture. I mean, moving that business into the data and internet space was huge. It was so difficult, had to fight against so many barriers and so forth. And hey, we did it. So I guess the other thing is that my leadership experience is all about pain. I decided that and discovered that pain was a strategic concept because that's what it took to be able to tolerate that and achieve what we did.
Yeah, and it's those that can tolerate the most pain win. So
seems that way.
You used the word, you caught my attention right away with the word audacious. And it's like, when I think of that, it's like, I think of more than just wow. And so what were some audacious moves that you made that helped you get to $1 billion in sales?
Yeah, great question. First of all, I mean, I have to laugh because a lot of people will ask me to identify 3 or 4 things and then describe specifically how each of those contributed to a share of the billion. These are the analysts out there. And I keep saying, no, I never even stopped to try and figure that out, and nor do I intend to. The reality is, in a very complex world, you need to try a lot of things. You need to do a lot of little things right that in aggregate actually explain how a business can move forward. And that's one of the messages I will give to your audience. Do not look for a silver bullet because you won't find one. Just start looking for a whole bunch of little things that light fires in people. And so from a leadership point of view, that's what I tried to do. Find things that lit fires in people. Why? Because they executed around a strategy better. And why is that important? Well, because that delivered superlative results. And so, for example, I just off air before we started, I'm not a fan of the way organizations differentiate themselves these days. I think it's lazy, it's mediocre. It uses words like better, best, number one, market leader, which means nothing to customers, okay? Or they use aspirations, Lorraine. We're in business to save the home planet. Okay, well, I applaud your value system. Okay, but that doesn't tell me why I should buy from you and no one else. And that whole question about why I should buy from you seems to escape most businesses these days. And it's a function of academia and it's a function of momentum. So I had to come up with my own approach, my own breakaway approach to figuring out how to do this. And I created what I call the only statement. Okay, instead of saying you're best, number one, what you need to do is you're going to need to figure out what you're the only one who does what you do. And so the only statement's really simple. We are the only ones who. Okay, that statement is clear, it's granular, it can be measured, right? And quite frankly, you can get caught out if you're just trying to BS somebody. It's easy to spot somebody who says they're unique, but really aren't. And so that's an example of one of the things that we did that, and I still do this with clients. I find it an amazing journey with particularly small businesses and entrepreneurs who haven't really thought this through before they start their business. And I keep saying to them, if you're not unique, if you're not different in some way, stop spending money because you're wasting it. Okay, all you're doing is adding to the claptrap and the clutter out there of sameness and not giving your customers any reason why they should buy from you. So the only statement has turned out to be a really huge innovation for me because it calls out business generally who tend to continue to adhere to traditional ways of at least describing how they're different. And it turns out the descriptions are completely hogwash anyways. And so that was one. But there's another one that was kind of cool because we had a lot of fun with this. You know, in every business, there's a bunch of rules and procedures and systems that don't make any sense to customers, right? And if you don't think you have any, you're not looking close enough for all you people out there, right? So we had a bunch of these things. And my logic here was really simple. If we don't cleanse the inside of this business, we'll never be able to execute well. If we don't execute well, we won't perform well. So one of the things I did is I attacked what I call dumb rules. I said, all right, we're in the business now of killing dumb rules. A dumb rule is anything that does not make any sense to a customer, just cheeses them off and makes them talk badly about us and go somewhere else. So we had this, we'll call it a program because that's the nomenclature that everybody uses, called Killing Dumb Rules. I would show up in the workplace with a white T-shirt and a dumb rules on it with a big X through it, and we would have contests, okay, in terms of who could identify and kill the dumbest rule that we did. And frontline people loved this. Employees loved it, okay, because they knew that we did stupid things, but no leader had ever said, okay, let's admit we do stupid things and let's cleanse the environment of those. And so we had a lot of fun. Now, what that kind of a program did is showed people that we were listening, okay, that what they said about our business was right. And if we listened to them, if we cleaned it up, it would have an amazing impact. Now, I don't know specifically how much of the billion was due to dumb rules, and I'm never going to find out because I don't care. But all I know is that was a program that captured people's hearts and imagination, and they executed unbelievably. We had fun. So those kinds of things. Okay, you won't find dumb rules in a textbook, Lorraine, other than be different or be dead, right? You won't find them there because most leaders, they go with the pedantic approach. And it's unfortunate because people want their leaders to light them up, to give them hope and meaning, right? They don't want to hear the intellectual mumbo jumbo. That's not where they're at. They want to make it easy for them to do their jobs because they want to do a better job. So I sort of targeted the emotional side and the passionate side of people as opposed to the intellectual side. I could teach them the business. I couldn't teach them how to love human beings. And that was a huge part of our recruitment process as well. And that led me to my own other little program, which I call Hiring for Goosebumps. So we tended to hire people who lit me up, okay, in terms of a story that they could provide that showed how much they cared for people. Why is that important? Because you're in the customer service business. And if you don't have people that like people who would rather be doing code or HTML programming, then you're in a lot of trouble. You're never going to create memorable experiences, right? And of course, that was a huge thing. So that's a couple of sprinkling of things that come to mind about the breakaway stuff that we did.
No, that's awesome. And, you know, it's like you kept on going and I'm having like, oh, I want some follow up here and follow it. You know, I'm like, oh my gosh. And then he's going to something else. And now I'm all excited. You got me excited. Just listen.
Oh, good.
So I got a couple follow-up questions here because, you know, one of the things is I probably have some listeners today that's like, well, they'll probably say, well, they thought about your only statement. Okay. And I've heard only statement before, but said in a little different way. And it's like, well, what if you don't have an only statement? Let's forget that question. Does everybody have everybody in business have an only statement?
So my response to that is you have to have one. You may not have one at the moment, or you may not think you have one. And my experience has been some people do, they just don't recognize it. So when I'm working with them, we eventually discover it, because that's the other thing I had to do, is create my own planning process that was built to execute, called strategic game planning. And we literally can create a plan for a business in 48 hours. Okay, this is not the McKinsey approach, okay? This is a Roy approach that says we're going to get it just about right. We're going to hit the bricks running, and we're going to learn along the way whether it was the right thing or not. So we're going to revise it along the way. So the only statement creation is a huge part of the third question in my strategic game planning process that says, how are you going to compete and win? You're going to do that by being the only ones that do what you do. And so that piece of work is in that particular part of the process. And what I find is the first thing that people do is, Roy, I'm not special. Okay, so all right, I get that. So let's work with this. I would say that 50%, now maybe 60% of that kind of a response, we eventually were able to carve out something that is meaningful. Okay. The other thing I will say, and the other 50% or 60, 40%, we have to create it. Okay. So even if you didn't think you were special, okay, we need to create specialness for you to go forward in terms of your strategic game plan. Because if we don't do that, you're going to be like everybody else. Look, if everybody's listening to the same consultants except me, if everybody is reading the same books, if everybody's following the same formulas, how can anybody be different? They're all the same. Okay, so you need to get the hell out of that mindset, put the textbook down, and start doing practical things like creating your only statement. That's where you want to spend. You don't want to spend your time on figuring out what social media platform you need to be on before you have a strategic game plan. Okay, and I find that the sexiness of that just gets, especially entrepreneurial leaders, gets them all caught up, right? So you need to take a step back. But there is a specific process that I've created to actually get an only statement out of people, whether you have one today or whether you don't. And the thing is, the other point I want to make here is the only statement is not your view of you. Okay, it's your view, it's your customer's view of you. And so when you create this statement, it's like, okay, do we really understand the target market you're going after? Because this isn't a statement about mass markets, which, by the way, don't exist anyways, because there's no such thing as an average customer. We all know that. So this is a matter of carve out what I call the who you're going to serve, understand what they crave, not what they need. I mean, the world is, especially when you're looking for opportunities to price up and not price down and be a commodity, is all about cravings and needs and wants and what people lust for and crave and covet. It's not about what they need, because everybody has basically their needs satisfied. And if you want to play the needs game, you're going to be competing on price, and we all know where that goes, okay? Everybody out there, with the moment you decide to cut your prices, okay, your customers love it, your margins suffer, and why would you go there? You need to do the work on the only and based on what people crave, okay? Your target market craves. And I find when I get people to go through that regimentation of defining who you're talking to, what they crave, and then what your competencies are, now let's match those and come up with an only statement, I find it works. Okay, it's because the process most people don't follow, because they start thinking about how am I special, and not what are the needs of my target market in terms of cravings? What do they lust for? And how can I play into that? Because the lust market, coin a phrase, is a market with very little competition. And therefore, the ability to premium price is very, very high. When you start dealing with people, with what people crave and what they desire. Let me give you an example. I just finished doing a gig with a company in Eastern Canada who thought they were in the boat selling business. So this was a boat selling business, right? So I suspect that that's not where we were going to end up. How can you be the only one that does boat selling? It's a pretty tough place to end up. So when we went through what the boat dealers who they serve, what their cravings and desires were, it turned out that it wasn't about receiving boats. It was about improving their profitability. And so what we did is we morphed the business away from selling boats. And I'll read you their only statement. This company is the only complete service provider, so they're not in the product business at all, committed to delivering solutions to grow a boat dealer's business. But just think about this. This is a company who thought they sold boats, but that's not where we ended up. Where we ended up was claiming that they're the only people, only partner who could help grow the boat dealer's business. Just think about that value proposition. We don't sell boats. We're here to help you grow your business. Oh yeah, the boat is part of that, but that's not the big part. You're right. The boat will float. It won't sink, right? But what makes us special is our ability to help you manage your business. This is coming from a boat seller. Now that's an example of how we reframed the business and created an only statement out of it. And so for the people thinking that they're not special, part of that is you're not framing yourself right because you don't understand your target market's cravings and what they actually desire. And once we're able to do that, it opens up some possibilities. It really does. And it's powerful as heck.
Yeah, I see that. You know, it's funny, you also alluded earlier on in the interview about hiring people and hiring people that give you goosebumps. And I actually got to experience that in my life when I hired my first hire. I wanted my first hire to be perfect because I had used virtual assistants before and it was disastrous. And in more ways than one, like I actually ended up hiring somebody that didn't know how to read. You just can't get that. Like, because, you know, when you're interviewing somebody online and, you know, somebody wrote your resume and all that, you know. So I actually hired a company to hire for me. And I remember having a conversation when it got to the interview with me, like I interviewed her. I asked her one question. What was the one thing that you did in your work, where you work or in what you do daily, that you made a mistake at, and how did you correct it? And I didn't even know this about her, but like she said, you know, she owned a farm, and she's going to be listening to this now. But the deal breaker for me is that she does some farming stuff, and literally she made it right by going to what happened when that animal died, and they replaced that animal. And on top of that, they also looked to see what the problem was, and it happened to be a shrub that was. And to me, that was the most amazing thing. She's the one that's going to edit this, so she's going to hear this. But that's what really impressed me about her. And love you, Hannah. But anyways, so what I was going to say is that you have a book out, and what's it called again? It's
the seventh book in my Be Different or Be Dead series, and it's called The Audacious Unheard-of Ways. I took a startup to $1 billion in sales. It's been out for about, I would say, 9 months now. And basically, it's, first of all, the point I want to make, all the books I've read are based on what I actually did in business. So this isn't a theoretical composition. Okay, this is a compendium of the practical proven things that work for me in my career as a leader. And in this particular case, were instrumental in helping us grow to $1 billion in annual sales. So that's out. I've been writing on this stuff since 2009. I've been blogging on it. My original book was called Be Different or Be Dead, Your Business Survival Guide. I wrote that in 2009. So my latest book is kind of like an update on that in a way, because as I work more with people like you on my stuff, I learn more about my stuff, right? And it gives me an opportunity to present it in a certain way that caters to the different ways people learn. And that's really important. And so, I've been working at this. It's my life. I have the Be Different or Be Dead DNA strand. I have it running through my veins. It's just what pushes me, and it excites me to actually try and make a difference and change the conversation out there away from copying best practices, away from copying everybody else, which is ridiculous, okay, to trying new things, simple things that light fires in people. That's kind of like what I'm trying to do.
Okay. Well, how did you come up with this like idea of like, what is the idea behind this whole be different and be dead? Where did it come from? What made you like all of a sudden rebel against the textbook, rebel against everybody saying you're not going to get anywhere in your business if you don't do X, Y, and Z? Believe me, I've been through plenty of programs that told me to do this. And even when it didn't make sense, I did it because they said this was proven, because that's what they use. They use this. This is a proven method, you know what it is. I'm sure.
And the reality is, it's not proven. It's somebody's view of what's theoretically correct, and there's nothing more intellectually dishonest than having somebody promulgate that kind of position. In any event, clearly I'm giving you what my views are. It didn't look at it. This did not start out as a rebellion. What it started out was a survival and growth requirement. In order for me to do what I had to do, I could not rely. I tried to rely, for example, on the normal, strategic planning 101, with subject matter, put me to sleep. It's interesting and immediate cure for insomnia as far as I was concerned, but it didn't work for me. And for one simple reason, it did not allow me to execute quickly. Okay, because getting to $1 billion isn't about pondering. It's about doing stuff and doing lots of stuff and making lots of mistakes and stepping out, not stepping out of the box, creating a new box to play in. Okay, it's that sort of mindset. So I found I had to go there. It was a matter of driving performance. I didn't have a choice. Now, the reality was, of course, people looked at what we were doing and they named it. Everybody has to have a tag these days, right? So they tagged it as rebellion and contrary. And I said, fine. The reality is, it's my survival. Okay, breaking away and being different is my survival. If I'm not, I'm dead. Because if I can't differentiate myself in this world, then I'm going to go the way of the dodo bird awful quickly. And there's plenty of examples out there where businesses have failed because they can't differentiate. And the reality is, for most entrepreneurs in a new business, 50% of you will be dead in 36 months. I'm sorry to say, that's just it. One way to try and have a chance is to think about this notion of being different. It's all about differentiation. The other day I was asked by somebody, what are the 3 main challenges, to businesses today? And I said, simple: differentiate, differentiate, differentiate. Because it's not being done well out there. It's not hard to do. You just have to have that breakaway mindset that leads you into that world. And I'd love to help people do that. I mean, get rid of the claptrap. You're not better. You're not best. That's your mom's view of you. That's not your customer's view of you. So you need to figure that out. And so it was a survival thing. It was a tool that enabled me and enables me now, to stand out and actually cut through the clutter and achieve some level of performance that makes sense from the objectives that I have.
Wow. I mean, I love it. I'm like all excited. I hope my listeners are excited as I am, because it's, we have all of us who've, went through the school of hard knocks when it comes to business, that, there's certain exercises that no matter what program I signed up for, we had to do our ideal client in our target market. And here's the thing is that I have met people along the way 10 years later now doing the same thing, but they still don't know who their ideal client is and their target market is, and they can't start their business yet because they don't have a website. And I'm talking 10 years later, being a rookie in a program together with this person, and they're still at the same spot where I left them. And I know plenty of other people that have left the spot where I am now. So how important do you think all those little things are? Because I mean, it seems to me what you're saying is that if you have your only statement, then the only thing that that everything else will come into place, that all the other stuff you don't have to worry about, in a sense. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no question. Like one of my big thing is called Roy's Rule of Three, and it's all about focus, focus, focus. I mean, one of the biggest problems, especially entrepreneurs have, is they chase stuff. I call it yummy. They chase yummy, right? It tastes good and it gives you immediate gratification. In today's world, I mean, that feeds people. Everybody needs to be immediately gratified, et cetera, et cetera. And the danger with that is that you lose sight of what you're really there to do. Okay. And so, yeah, focus, focus, focus is really, really, really important. The only statement allows you with granularity to define what the behaviors that you should be exhibiting, right? And the results that you should be achieving. Like the example I just gave you, these guys said they're the only one who in the market who are going to be growing their dealer's business. Now you can imagine what their day is going to look like now, okay, in terms of what their people do. They have to acquire competencies. They have to learn skills and trainings, a whole bunch of things that are way beyond selling. In fact, you and I could do a whole show on selling because I don't think it's needed, just to give you a heads up. In any event, so the other thing so basically it's moving on, okay? It's moving on from the stuff that is being promulgated from people who have never run a business. Because if you look at this, it's the classic blue ocean behavioral pattern for me. It's like blue ocean strategy, and I don't mean to be unkind, but it appeases intellectual curiosity. You know, we need to find a blue ocean, you know, an ocean where there's no competition. Are you kidding me? Most of us mortals play in a red ocean, okay? It is complete with intense competition. I want to know how to survive in that. It's all very well for you as an academic to tell me that I should go and find a blue ocean. Oh, cool. Okay, but 98% of us are in red oceans. Help me understand how I'm going to survive and thrive in that. The only statement plays into that. So this is not a theoretical treatise. The academic stuff gets you so far. And I am not suggesting that you don't need a good education. You do. But I can tell you from experience, if you want to be really, really successful and be superlative in terms of the performance level you drive, you have to put it down. You have to put that stuff down and take on new stuff that I've discovered. And look, I'm not being prescriptive here because there's other cool stuff that lights fires in people. You need to find those things. You need to do those things. Okay, that's where you need to take your heart and soul. Okay, don't try and redefine market segmentation, okay, and think that it's going to make you successful, because the process won't. What you need to do is find customers that crave something that you can play into and be the only ones in that space. That's what you have to do. Okay, so that's where I'd like to see you spend 90% of your time. Put the textbook down. Okay, let's start talking about what really matters. Cravings, how big, who do you want to serve, hiring for goosebumps, cut the crap, kill dumb rules, right? Line of sight leadership. Those are the things. Why do I say that? Because those are the things that help me get to $1 billion in sales. So I can always turn around, Lorraine, and say, how do I know this stuff works? Because in aggregate, they help me get to $1 billion. That's how I know they work. And I would challenge the academics to come up with the same proof of purchase as that. And they can't. So why do we listen to them?
Yeah, and the other thing
put all of our eggs in that basket.
Yeah, and the other thing, what I discovered though, is that, and that's by being on, a board of a college social media digital marketing program, and realized that the people that were teaching digital marketing actually had never really grew their business with digital marketing. And see, that's the deal. And that's, I know this, I've gone through programs, and one of the things, and who knows, maybe this could be my only statement in the sense of something for me, but one thing I realized somewhere along the line is that there's got to be a time where you stop learning and start doing. And that was what it was for me. And I decided, and actually the more and more I implemented certain things that I, and in the beginning you're thinking, well, this may work, and then after a while, I feel like you discover actually what works for you. Like the whole selling thing. Yeah, we could talk an hour on selling, trust me. But what I realized is one time I sold when I wasn't selling. And that was what I discovered. I was actually at a networking event And I wasn't even talking about my business at all. It was my personality and my person that sold this person. They called me up afterwards and asked me a bunch of questions. This was like 2 months after the networking event. So they were really thinking hard if they wanted to hire me. Asked me a couple questions. Then I didn't hear from them for another 3 months. Didn't sell them anything. And then eventually they hired me as a client. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was some kind of attraction. I solved something they needed. It was some kind of attraction I had. And there were probably several other people that were like me, but there was something that made me different than everybody else.
Well, what you did, okay, and this is a great segue. I mean, one of the issues I have with sales, as it's traditionally defined, is that they're basically what I call product floggers. They flog. Sales flog stuff. Why? Because they've been taught to flog. Okay, I can teach you funnel management. I can teach you cold calling, and all that stuff is supposed to aid and abet flogging. As far as I'm concerned, flogging is kind of like, it's disgusting. Okay, because it makes people feel like they're being downtrodden and they're being beaten up. Okay, so what you did is you didn't flog. What you did is what I would call serve in a different way. Okay, you served by not flogging, by listening, having a conversation, and not leading with the flog. If you don't lead with the flog, you're automatically, in my view and in my world, you're positioning yourself in the right space to have a conversation. That's why I say we don't need salespeople. We need servants. We need people that have this natural ability. They were born with this DNA to actually serve people, okay, and pull in the value proposition of the business that they're in and use it accordingly. But they don't lead with it. Flogging is, and everybody does it. It's just like another kind of like, okay, sales 101 says we need to flog, so we need to learn all of the skills around that to make us better floggers. No, you need to get a new box. The new box is a serving box. It's an experiential box. Sales, look at, I had to completely redefine the way we compensated salespeople, okay, because they were all based on quotas, which are based on products. And I said, nope. We're going to change that. We're going to get the experience in there. We're going to allow the customer to rate the salespeople, okay, on a number of behaviors that customers wanted their sales reps to exhibit. Okay, and there are simple things like follow-up, empathy, all those, they call them soft things, but they're not soft, right? Because people buy on the basis of that. And so I divided it up. Year one, I said, okay, you're going to have 50% of your quota based on products, because I'm not going to do this overnight, 50% based on a customer report card. They went apoplectic over this. They all ran to their caves and like they're, oh my goodness, I'm not a good person because my customer's going to finally have a chance to rate my performance. Right? So the interesting thing is, after we did it once, we cleansed the sales force. There were a lot of people that said, "Oh, if this is what Roy's going to keep doing, I don't want to play. I'm going to go work for a flogger." And I was happy that they did. But the other people said, well, okay, this seems right. So what I did is I introduced the customer perception piece based on experience and that whole notion that you and I were just talking about serving. And then over time, I moved the percentage of their bonus based on that up, gradually up. Okay, not wanting to completely end up with a sales force of 0 or 1 after introducing the program. And so it was another example, I guess, of an audacious move that nobody else took. And we had sales reps who made it matter what their customers felt and what their customers said about them. And the truly incredible result, sales reps were the ones that rated highest on a customer perception basis. Duh. I mean, is that a surprise? Well, no, it's not a surprise, because serving and purchasing, you know what it did? I describe it as we don't need sellers. We need people that create buyers. Okay, so my approach was always to work on the behavior piece, because that created an environment and a demand pull from customers as opposed to a supply push. The product flogger pushes supply. That's why people don't like slick salespeople, because they feel beaten up by the supply pusher. So what we need to do is we need to get organizations thinking about pulling demand. Well, you can't pull demand when you're oriented and paid to flog products. You got to change that system. So I changed it.
Wow. Yeah. I wonder about this. You just said create buyers. Now, how does one create buyers?
Well, okay. First of all, it's by being real and not being pretentious and spending a lot of your time with your team. That, as a leader, that's one of the things, because literally you can't identify a spark if you're sitting in your office on the 77th floor. Okay, you can't do that, and you can't delegate the responsibility of finding sparks to one of your team members. As a leader, I call it leadership by serving around. Okay, and that was all based on getting out in the workplace among people, asking a very simple question: how can I help? Okay, just like New Amsterdam, how can I help? And being held accountable to follow up, okay, in terms of delivering that. What you find after a while is, first of all, people expect you to be there, and they know the question you're going to ask. And if you're lucky and take it serious, they will also trust that you will deliver. When that starts to work, the fire starts to burn in people, right? And their willingness to go where you want them to go, their willingness to absorb the pain that it takes to get there. You get people that trust all of that, it starts to build. And it ends up to be the virus that spreads that we want. It's not a COVID virus. It's a performance virus. And it spreads. And they tell people they want to be part of it, I used to do things what I tagged the bear pit session. The bear pit session was a regular meeting that I had. To put this in perspective, my organization was about 10,000 people. Eventually it got there, right? So in order for me to stay in touch, I couldn't do it on email. I couldn't do it on that. I couldn't do it on, videos, right? Person to person is what I did. So it's very arduous. So I had to create some sort of structure around that. One of the things that I did is I created these bear pit sessions, which were cross-functional employee groups where I would go in without an entourage. That's the other thing. You can't, as a leader, you cannot have 6 or 7 of your lieutenants with you. That's not currency building, right? That's protectionistic. Now your people don't like it because they're wondering what Roy's up to, which tells you something as well. But I'd go in and have a conversation. What's not working? Give it to me. Tell me. Just tell me what's not working. And I took notes, lots of notes. Now, note-taking is a lost art, Lorraine. It's an art of the servant leader that's been lost, because most people will have their EA with them, right, to take notes. No, you take your own notes, because then you go back and you can understand what they mean. Note-taking is an expression of the fact you care what people are saying, what they're talking about, okay? That's a huge piece. So I would do these on a regular basis. It ended up to be a really good source of information that I needed in my firelighting role as a leader. And so you just look for these places. I mean, I sat on switchboards because this was out of a telecom business. I sat in operator services alongside operators, and I listened to the stuff that they went through. And I empathized with some of the really challenging customer moments that they have. And every person out there that's at the end of a telephone in a call center, whatever, I get it. I know that it's not the best environment, right? From a point of view of attack, and some people aren't nice people. The challenge is to figure out how people can cope through that. And you can't help people do that if you don't understand the pain that they're going through. So I spend a lot of time doing that.
Wow. Well, this has been really, you have lit some fires in me just by listening to you. And I'm sure if you lit fires in me, that you've lit some fires in my audience.
Awesome.
There was one piece of advice that you can get. So I have all kinds of listeners. I have people that are startups listening to this. I have people who are seasoned business owners. And then I have people who maybe are coming out of corporate and thinking of starting up their own business. What would you say, maybe give one piece of maybe universal advice that will help them move forward in their businesses?
That's easy. Is be different.
I knew you were going to say that.
seriously, it's one of these things. It's one of the, I knew you'd be disappointed if I didn't, but it's one of these things that's so obvious to me. Like, if you can't figure that out, okay, first of all, there's no use being special if the only person that knows it is your mom, okay? Seriously. You got to be special, and you got to get visible in ways that people care about. Again, look at, I want to re-emphasize this. Being different isn't about narcissism. It's not about green hair, okay? It's not about all that stuff. It's not about DNA, okay, in terms of what gender you are, whatever. It's doing something different that people care about. And so the big different thing is this serving mindset, but doing it in a way that nobody else does, creating an experience that nobody else does, right? Creating a package of value that nobody else does. You're the only one that does that. And if I'd like to see more energy on that, put the textbook down. Okay, it got you this far. Good for you. All right, but what I'd like to see is more energy going into how can I be different in the way my target group cares about. And don't forget that, there's the word, okay? Cares about, not needs, they care about. So the solution's got to be compelling, it's got to be relevant, and it's got to be unique. And when I say unique, it's got to be something that only you do, or you do it in only a very specific way, and nobody else can claim that. So that's what I would say. Look, start at right after you listen to this podcast. Okay, I want you to sit down and say, okay, what's one thing I can do in a be different way? One of the things that I do every time I'm confronted with a challenge, I have what I call my be different lens. I say to myself, how can I do this differently? How can I do this in a way that will surprise people? How can I do this in a contrarian way? Okay, how can I do this and light someone and see the pupils in somebody's eyes dilate? Because when that happens, you're actually achieving a little bit of that be different ethic and mindset, right? Just sit down and do one thing different today, and then do two things different tomorrow. And every time you're confronted with a challenge, ask yourself the question, make it matter to you personally. How can I do this in a way that nobody else does? When we do that, we unleash creativity, we unleash passion, we unleash emotion, and we unleash innovation. Isn't that what we need in the world? We don't need a lot of people who copy everybody else. We don't need everybody following the same rules. We don't need people that comply with things without even thinking about them. We don't need a world like that. We need a people who are audacious, who are brave to step out and go where no person has gone before. To quote somebody don't mean to be corny on this, but seriously, that's where we need to get to. And it's not about the individual. If you get a whole tribe doing stuff like this, think of the social power that unleashes. Think about the economic power that it unleashes. So at the end of the day, it's a better place for all of us.
Absolutely. When you were talking about that, I always thought there's a meme on social media that they have all these ballet dancers and they're all doing ballet. And then there's this one little girl that's like off in some other space. You made me think of that meme. Listen, I know if I connected with you here today, I know that there's other people that connected with you. If there's something that you want to share or tell people about how they may further get in touch with you, please share that now.
Yeah, so I have a website, bedifferentorbedead.com. There's a few pages on there. I try and make as many resources available as I can. So I blog every week. So my blog has been there since 2009. So there's a lot of content about the subjects that we talked about. So you'll find Goosebumps, you'll find the strategic game plan, you'll find the only statement there. There's a page that describes the 7 books that I've written. So you can have a look at that, see if anything tweaks you. And the other thing is I've got an email address, which is roy.osing@gmail.com. And I'm really happy to engage with people one-on-one. I mean, I get emails from people these days saying, Roy, here's my draft only statement. What do you think? I love that because it's an opportunity to connect and help. And that's really what I'm trying to do.
And I love that, because being out of a place of service, because I could feel that in your hearts. That's awesome. So thank you so much for being my guest. This has truly been inspirational. So to everybody out there, have a really great week. And I hope you learned something today. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Biz Gone Social podcast. Find us on Instagram at BizGoneSocial for extra tips. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, stay social.